Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Show Up with Gran. I am your host, Gran, and as a reminder, I am not a therapist. I'm just somebody going along his own mental health journey, giving you guys little tips and tricks that you guys can use on your own path. You can find whatever I say and try them out and use them, or don't. It's up to you to find out what works best for your brain. All these things are just things that I've picked up along the way that have helped me, and hopefully it will help you somehow go out throughout the week and get better, because all we can do is just try to be a little better every single day, because being a lot better is not something that will happen overnight. It's just a journey, and it's a wave going up and down. For instance, this week I decided that it would be a good idea to go over some, ideals or principles of, like, I've gone over in the past. The main one I was considering doing was mindfulness, because for some reason, if you don't practice mindfulness a lot, it kind of it's like a skill you can be aware of, but if you're not intentional with it, it just becomes like a checklist item. They're like, oh yeah, I'm mindful because I checked it off, rather than being mindful because you're truly in the moment. And so I wanted to go over that, because something that I've been trying to do a lot lately, because I do have a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, and when I am not focusing on staying in the moment, a lot of times my fear response wins. So I have to go over like a lot of things that I've done to kind of combat that thing. For instance, I did a cooking show because I was terrified of doing a cooking show. A, to find out whether or not that was something I actually wanted to do, and B, because I think it's a good idea to push your boundaries and get out of your comfort zone. And even as I'm saying that, I am aware of the fact that it is something I struggle with, even though I'm a performer. For instance, I grew up in a haunted house. It's Halloween, October, spooky season, love it. But I also developed this real love and kinship for like improv. And haunted houses are built on the foundation of improv, because for my house especially, you had like this room or area is based off of this movie, and so you kind of improvise based on the reality of that world you were placed in. And one of the original things I was placed in when I got good, because before that I wasn't that good, was 30 Days of Night. And the only other thing that we were told was this is like an iconic line from that movie. And I wanted to quote it to you, but like I only remember vague pieces of it because it's been a while since I've watched that movie. But like I can still visualize that in my head, and I feel like I could do a pretty good job of like inhabiting that world, because it's a very unique way of like visually depicting vampires. And the thing that I learned with that improv is commitment. Because once you commit to like whatever creature you are, it's way easier to get a response out of people. But if the person that you're trying to scare feels like you're not 100% committed, then they won't have a visceral response. And it's kind of the thing with your mental health also, is it's kind of like, as long as we're not 100% committed to like the change we're trying to do, then our brain is going to give us little nuggets that make us believe we're changing when really we're staying put. And for mindfulness, for a while, I thought I was being mindful, but then I realized, oh, no, you're not being mindful. You're literally allowing your brain to like go off on all these different tangents when you intended to have this time be about like an audiobook I'm reading. Also, driving for me is inherently mindful, because you have to be aware of the road, and you have to be aware of your surroundings. And if you're not, that's called being on autopilot. And not only is that bad in your mental health scenarios, it's also really, really bad in driving, because most of the times we have like 8 seconds to respond to an accident. Like from the second like it starts happening, you have 8 seconds. And if you're on autopilot, usually you lose 2 seconds to your brain recognizing, because it's so delayed because it's on autopilot, that a threat has entered. And that's why mindfulness, you have to be 100% aware of your surroundings, so that way you can definitely respond to things happening around you when they happen. But I like to listen to audiobooks while I am driving. And in order to do that, I have to like I always prioritize the driving first, and then I'm like, okay, and whatever awareness that I have outside of my awareness of this car, this vehicle, people's safety, I'm going to only allow that to be my tangent for the day. I'm not going to allow all these like what if thoughts to preoccupy my brain, because it can be very easy, especially when it's a hard day, to replay like events that upset us or just, it's very easy to like, oh, well, we're just driving home, so let me replay all these things that I wish would change or wish could be better or like regret, because that regret's a hard thing. And it's just kind of trying to find the balance and being able to find that is a way of making it so our brain doesn't get lost in, I think, the rapids. I'm going to describe it as rapids in my brain because so many thoughts happen at the same time that sometimes really it's only like the bubble thoughts that like, because rapids have foam and then like evaporation happening because of how like them crashing into objects. And so really it's just that like mist thought is what I'm getting rather than like the deep thoughts that are underneath the rapid. And sometimes that's good to ignore thoughts, and sometimes it's bad, especially if those deep thoughts are like things that are scary that we don't want to face today. And it's only a bad thing if I haven't intentionally put that thing in the deeper parts of the water. Because the whole point of mindfulness is to develop this awareness so that way we can choose something that is garnered to help us like, I don't know, be better. Because an example for this, because I was talking about improv, is like for me to have the awareness of a joke in a scene, I have to make my brain be in the scene completely, because my brain is a reactive brain. I don't come up with jokes. Like, I don't have like a billion jokes off. Like, I'm not sitting here with 1,000 jokes memorized so that way if I hear an opportunity to say one of the jokes I love, I can throw it out there. My brain is normally like, oh, this would be really funny because this is like a really good punchline for this joke that I had. And usually that comes because most improv has like games that you play, and most horror improv and haunted houses also have a game that you play. Like, for instance, I was once in a room that was based on Saw 5, and one of the iconic pieces of Saw 5 is like, again, this is a horror like episode, so we're gonna gloss over what I'm about to say. But in Saw 5, there is a room where in order to like succeed in like escape, you have to like sacrifice a certain amount of blood to make the door open. And then, fun fact, the human body only has like 8 to 10. I've heard both, but I think it's actually 8, but I'm going to give the leanway of 10 because I'm not a scientist. But like, to do that room, I had to make sure that because we had placed that set piece in the room, that was the game I played for anybody entering the room, because otherwise it's just this weird like object occupying so much space that anybody who entered that part of the house would be like, oh, well, there was this guy acting, and then there was just like this giant thing that we had to walk around, but I don't know why it was there except to be like a tripping hazard, because it was about like, I think, waist high, because the top of it is what you put your like hand in. And if you want to know more details about that, you can watch Saw 5. But it was just one of those things where I'm like, I am not somebody who is a very physical person. I never thought I would do this kind of stuff. But like, to do that set, you really had to commit to the fact that like you were in a lot of pain, and that what you were doing to yourself in that scenario would make you kind of writhe around on the ground. And I actually was really like proud of myself because people were really freaked out and believed what I was doing. And I'm going to bring up another story because it's like that set reminded me, like, because that was before I went off to New York City for like college. And in New York City, they were filming Jessica Jones season 1, and the villain of that show has the ability to like implant ideas into your head, and then you have to do whatever he says. I did not know this, and like I did not know they were filming, but like this scene is from season 1, and what happens in the scene is there's this guy who's just being talked to, and then he's told by the villain to like pour hot boiling like cocoa over himself, and so when he does, he like screams, and then people start fleeing because they think they're under attack. And I was there in New York City when they were filming the scene live. And all I saw from my standpoint, because I didn't see, like, I went to acting school and I was aware of like the setup for stand-ins or for background actors as they go onto a set and do a scene. But they had taken over a park, Union Square, and nothing like I saw told me that this wasn't a real person, but all I saw was somebody scream, like somebody throw up, scream, and collapse to the ground, and everybody running away, but nothing that was showing me that there was a threat in reality. So then I was like, oh, this person's really hurt. I gotta go help them, obviously. And then I was immediately about to get to them, and then security for the set stopped me. And then I was ignoring them because I'm like, I don't know why you're trying to stop me. There's a person hurt. Did you not hear them? And then they told me that what it was. And then I didn't believe them until I saw everybody backtrack and move back to one. And because of my training, I recognized that that's what they were doing, because I saw a lot of them move and run away, and then to see those same people go back and then stand at a point for them to start is when I believed what I was being told, because I had all these like outside scenarios teaching me that, well, not teaching me, but like showing to me that it wasn't real, that this was like a thing for show, and like I had enough experience to believe this person because I discovered about myself that when somebody's in pain, my reaction is to run to them regardless of whether or not I know them or not. That was something that until you're in a dire situation, you're not going to know that about yourself, because our inherent thought, I don't know, until you're in fight or flight, I feel like you don't know how you're really going to react to something. You have the idea of what you would do, but like your reality of how you would react in a fight or flight situation, you will only find out when you're in that situation. Because we can theorize as much as we want, but we all have like these things that are like our internal selves that are our real truths. But we all have these like ideas we have about ourselves, and so I don't know. I was just surprised because my thought has always been, oh well, if trouble's happening, I'm gonna run away. I'm not gonna run towards the danger. And then my only thought after this situation happened was, oh, okay, well, I guess if I can clearly tell that there is no danger present, but there's somebody in pain, then I'll run and help. But it was like seconds had passed. Like whatever happened, if this was reality, whatever happened to this person, if it was real, would have only, the person that might have done it to them would only have been gone for 10 seconds or less, because that's how quick the reaction point was. But that is an example of me, A, believing a scenario, and B, running to help. But like the person who screamed was an actor, and they were so committed to their like blood curdling scream that it made me believe they were in pain. So I wanted to help them. And that's kind of the same kind of commitment that you have to an improv scene when there's no like death or life or death's like circumstances happening. Like horror movies would be terrible if actors didn't commit to the fact that they were in an actual scene, if that makes sense. Because there are so many shots in a horror film of the actor just walking slowly. And if the actor was just like, I'm going to walk slowly here, I'm going to pick this, like, I can recognize really fast if somebody's just doing blocking and there's not like a believability there. Because like we had to learn in the film I shot, Ashes, something I had to keep reminding people, because like I came and did that film after I got out of college, and I just had to keep reminding them. I was like, hey, I know that we're on set, and then like you guys think that we don't have to start the action until I yell action. But what you're doing is I yell action and you still aren't in that scene yet. And I can tell that you don't believe that this shed that is decrepit is scary because we are occupying it and we all know who's here. We know the reality of like, this isn't actually something I found somewhere strange. We're at somebody's farm and they just happen to have these decrepit sheds, but it's but it's like as safe as possible for everyone. But I could tell that they weren't like putting themselves in the scenario of the character where this is the first time they've been there. They have no clue how to get out. They're surrounded by strangers. In Ashes, the movie I made, it is an abduction film. So they're also abducted, and so that's why it escalates the level of like danger. And so acting to me is an exercise in mindfulness, because in order to be like a truly, I think, dedicated to a character and to act, you have to believe where you're at. And if you start questioning or if you start thinking too much, then you are separating yourself from the reality of the world. An example of this that is very, I think, a good example of I'm an actor, I'm not like a writer, and so therefore because I'm an actor, I just have to commit to what I'm given, is Elizabeth Olsen, who is the Scarlet Witch. She filmed both WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange movie, back to back. But the writers of these two projects were not the same. And so Wanda, the character Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch, was a different version. To me, there's enough of a leeway that I buy that this could have WandaVision could have translated into Multiverse of Madness. Like, there's enough there that I can buy into it, but as an actor, I can see where I'm like, this feels like a totally different character, and these are supposed to be happening like right after each other. So I want to question that, but if I question that, then I'm taking out the reality of that world. And so if I am doing all these things and I am told that this is what the character's doing, then I as an actor have to just be like, okay, I have to believe that I just lost it. Like, cause you literally, it's like it's not like compromising. It's like, how do I accept what happened to me? How do I push to get what I want? How do I fight for the thing that I've lost? It's like, if you can question those things, or you can commit to what the character is doing. Because if you watch that movie, stuff happens and it's very wild, and it feels very much like, oh, we just completely jumped this character to a different point in the timeline, and the character was a hero before this movie happened. So it was a very huge jump for me, but like, I also am a huge fan of witches. This is a very Halloween style episode. Let's just put it that way. I'm a very huge fan of witches, and there's an object called the Darkhold, which it is something that plays with your mind and makes you believe that you're doing things that are just, but it just is there to twist your beliefs until you become the worst version of yourself. And so what I love about that acting choice is like, I'm just going to have to believe and give in to like, my character thinks she's doing the right thing, but she's being manipulated by this magical object. And she does not realize until a certain point in the movie that it is a manipulation and what she believes is in fact wrong. And it's one of the times I respect Marvel because sometimes they go into being like, this character would never do that. And then sometimes they're like, we're just going to change this for convenience. Another example of committing just to what you're being given and realizing that, like, as an actor, your job is just to commit to the moment, commit to what your character is saying, commit to your character's reactions. Your job is not to judge, because we don't judge ourselves in the moment. We have these reactions in the moment, and then after we've done them and we have enough separation, that's when we start judging ourselves. But we wouldn't act the way we do if we had those judgments going into something. Like, when we mess up, usually we've either forgotten something we've learned or we've been exposed to something we didn't know before. And it's like a learning lesson, but you can't know a lesson if you've never like had the experience before. And so Another example is the actress who plays Kamala Khan in she's Miss Marvel in the Marvels. Because there was a huge thing, people like thought that it failed the box office, but like they kept going after the actors and actresses, and I agree with the fact that as an actor your job is just to bring the reality of what you're given to life. And I love somebody who stands up for themselves, and the fact that my job as an actress is to bring what I'm given to life. Now, personally, there were some issues that I had because I'm a comic book fan, but like that wasn't my job to like edit those people. My job was to bring to life what I was given, and I don't own the rights or the copyright to this stuff. I'm just the actress who was given this part. And yeah, sorry, I'm realizing I'm talking a lot about acting, but it's because I love psychology. And a lot of times when you play a character, you're going through like these mental gymnastics that you would never inherently go through yourself. That's why I think villains are fun to play, because there's a lot of villains that I would never get behind, but I do think it'd be fun just to play with the psychology of them, because Thanos, since we're talking about Marvel, I think is one, a terrible villain, but also his like mental like psychology about what brings him to do what he does is so fascinating to me, that to portray that I think could be really fun. Because it's kind of like, oh, well, I don't believe in this stuff, but like there's a reality somewhere where if I wasn't who I am, I might have bought into this. Because I know the idea of population control with like the world having a finite resources is something that like is a debate that is gone around a lot. And it was just, this is a scenario that could solve this that I don't think is right, but it is fascinating to see somebody go through this scenario and then not ever realize what they're doing is wrong. And it's just one of those things where you're just like piecing together like, oh, these are a wide berth of wrong decisions. Getting away from Marvel, another example of somebody making a decision in the moment because he's trying to look out for like the immediate, like, oh, this will make them feel good now, rather than like realizing the depth of this lie, is in the movie / Broadway show Dear Evan Hansen. The premise of that show is the fact that like we have Connor. I don't know if his last name's Murphy, but his first name's Connor. And the show is about Evan Hansen signing this guy's cast who is bullying him, and then that child, like that kid, unfortunately takes his life, and then his parents find these letters that he stole from Evan that was based on a therapy assignment that he was assigned to like write letters to himself, and the parents mistake that for him writing to Connor. And so for me, I think the most human thing I think most people would fall into that, and is the fact that like if it would cost us nothing today, would you not just lie to let this person believe? Because Connor is isolated. He doesn't have that many friends, and his parents were worried about that. And so the thing that starts off everything is the simple lie of just not telling his parents that you were never friends with their child, because of how much they really needed their kid to have somebody in their life that was looking out for them. And that's the thing that I think is why I gravitate so much to that show, is like all the little lies that like are being told at first are things that I feel like are to make other people happy. And I think that's a human instinct, is just, I'm in pain. How can I spare somebody else pain? So you tell little lies, and then you tell so many that you lose sight of them, and then you end up being not only worse mentally for yourself, but also you're putting your other people at risk, because you've lied to them so much that like if that reality that you've basically built up gets shattered, then their perception of their child is then all shattered also, which is why people also think that Evan Hansen might be a bad character. But like, as somebody who struggles with social anxiety and has a problem just like I guess stopping misconceptions, because most of the times, unless I'm being confronted directly, I will just ignore, because ignoring is an immediate fix rather than like putting myself out there to stop somebody's misconception of me. And that's kind of something that I struggle with a lot. And that's what I originally was struggling with a lot when I started doing YouTube, is like so much of YouTube is kind of like, oh, I want to make sure that I like adhere to like other people's ideals of who I am, when in reality, I should be strong in the foundation of who I am, and the other people see that. And then if they want to like subscribe to who I truly am rather than this fake representation of myself, then that's great. And the thing I'm working on today is, again, I love acting, and I feel like because I was struggling for so long, I have like put this block up so that way I am mostly just myself. And you just heard me go off on this long spiel about psychology and like breaking down characters. I love doing that, and I used to be able to not only break them down but then become those people and see their perspectives. And I'm trying to get back to there and commit to their circumstances, because it is very easy to realize that screaming at like, a lot of times people don't realize that when you're on set and you're screaming at something, you're like, all you're doing is a reaction shot. Whatever you're screaming at is not actually there. Nowadays, it's probably CGI, so it is mostly your interpretation of what that thing is. Sometimes they like give you like a bone and they put somebody in makeup to scare you, but it is very much like you're making something up in your head and reacting from there. And that is, it's vying into like just continuing to play, but B, it's also like a place where you're like, oh, I have this ideal of something and I'm trying to latch on to it, when if I just took it for what it was, it might be scarier or might be even funny, because in that situation the ideal of it is scary, but the reality is you might be acting against a green ball. Or if you're what's his name, the youngest guy ever, you know his name, Ant-Man. I forgot his name, but he is known for, my instructor in acting school worked with, oh my gosh, what's his name? He's Ant-Man. I keep forgetting his name, but he acted with him, but they never actually looked at each other. Both of them did a scene where all they did was put a piece of blue tape on the wall and told them that that was their eye line, and they never actually looked at each other. And you can do that, but it takes a lot of focus and a lot of self-awareness to remain in your brain and the reality, and then just like hone in to being like, oh, well, I'm looking at this thing and this is where this character's supposed to be, but the actor is talking behind my head. I'm going to ignore that. This is something that if you watch the Lord of the Rings series or even The Hobbit, Sir Ian McKellen has talked about, because they never looked at each other in The Lord of the Rings, because they were using so many camera tricks to like make actors look bigger than other people because of like hobbits. And because of that, most of the time they weren't looking at them ever. And so really it became like, this is how you fake that little, little camera trick to give you that eye line, so you look like you're looking at somebody who's actually very far in the foreground, and you couldn't even touch them, let alone like see them. But it's just one of those funny things that happens. And the thing that I love about mindfulness is the fact that you have to be present in this current moment. Sometimes I lose track of it. Like in an audiobook, the tape just keeps going, and unless you rewind. But usually what it does for me is it keeps me out of the reality of that world, because I do have a very visual memory or visual like imagination. And so like normally if I'm hearing something in an audiobook, I'm picturing it in my head. And so what happens is I'm like, oh, well, this would be kind of cool if it was like depicted this way, and then like, oh, and then I have like, what was I gonna have for dinner again, or was I supposed to talk to that one person? I keep forgetting, and then I'm making all these lists, and then the story that I had in my head and the visual I was getting is no longer present because I separated. Whereas if I just remained in the moment and kept like those words to like I kept allowing those words to roll over me, it would have been better. And something that's another good example of this is like when you are trying to talk to somebody who, well, it can either be somebody you're upset with that you're trying to have like the dear man skill with, or it could be just when you're checking in with your friends and it's been a while. I am a friend who, if we haven't talked in a while, I am going to want to talk to you for a long time. I'm sorry, anybody who's ever told me, oh, I want to talk to you, Cameron, but you talk forever. And I'm like, listen, if we spoke every day and it was always 2-hour conversations, then sure, maybe we're talking too much. But if I haven't seen you in months or talked to you in months, we're going to have a long conversation. And then every time I want to have those long conversations, people are all like, I don't know, I just like did stuff. It wasn't really that important. And I'm like, we haven't seen each other for 6 months. I have done so much in 6 months, and you're telling me you've done nothing fascinating? I don't think so. I think somebody doesn't believe that their life is very meaningful. And that's for me to decide, not you. Your own judgments are yours to take. Like, you don't have to share everything with me, but like, again, I'm a movie buff. I'm a show buff. I'm just a storytelling person who loves stories. So if you just give me anything. What movies have you watched? We could bond over that if you don't want to talk about anything personal. Like, we don't have to have like deep, meaningful conversations all the time, but I do love hearing about somebody else's experience. But to do that and for me to react, which I spoke a couple of weeks ago about the difference between self-centered and selfish, is for me, when I'm catching up with somebody, I want to hear everything that they're doing. I want to be like, oh, this is what you're doing, and then like react to them as they're sharing their bits, like their nuggets of life with me, and just be there for them if they're like sharing something and they need like help or feedback for. But like, to do that, you really have to step outside of yourself and just be like a fly on the wall of their share, and then share your thoughts based on what they've expressed to you. Because unless I've spoken long enough that I feel like I can come back in and share my own stories and my own problems, I do try to listen to like what's presented and figure out A, if we're talking about solutions, or B, just wanting somebody to like, bond over shared trauma. Because like that can be very gratifying and feel like you're not alone sometimes. But either one of those scenarios, if you're a problem solver also, is I need to solve your problem. I don't need to bring my problem to the table and then solve my problem while you solve your problem next to me. Like that, like to me, it's very self-centered to present your problem after somebody has shared theirs, because like it's one problem at a time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't solve every single problem all at once. You have to solve them piece by piece. And so there, again, I wish I knew what like just emotional intelligence, I think, is the one that's bad, where it's like, oh, well, somebody shared something, and instead of actually hearing what that person shared with you, you got reminded of your own trauma and your own issues, when that's not what the share was for. The share was, I need my friend to hear me and to understand me and allow me to vent something, because I'm normally not allowed that space. And so if my friend can hear all this stuff and make what I'm saying make sense to me, then I know that I'm not adrift. I know that I have some kind of foundation to build upon. And that's, I think, a key point of just being mindful in the moment, because awareness of not only where you are, like currently I'm in my apartment, I'm in my living room, and that's an awareness. But like, if I started listening for like, oh, sounds outside the door, there is like sirens off in the background because I'm by the airport, and it is what it is. But also, like, it's an apartment complex. I'm sure if I listened or if you just grow your expansive like mindfulness, you become aware that like, oh, in an apartment there are more people, which means there's people like moving throughout the space. And a lot of times when people are being like noisy, it's because they forget that their little apartments aren't by themselves. We're all in the same complex. We all have these same areas to like cohabitate with. Sometimes you find somebody that you can't stand that you run into almost every day, and I could make that a big deal and like try to like avoid them, or I could just be like, well, I guess my early morning routine is I get to see this person that I can't stand every day and just nod and hope they don't speak to me because I have nothing nice to say to them because they are always a jerk to me. But at the same time, because of who I am as a person, I have that inherently because of just how rude they've been to me. But I do also have the separation enough to be mindful and be like, well, maybe today's the day they'll decide to be nice. Or today's the day where they just don't, like, A, they don't speak to me, or they speak to me and they're somehow at least cordial. Like, not nice, not mean, just we exist in the same space. And sometimes that's a win because there are times where we're going to be surrounded by people that we cannot stand, but we don't have the ability to like push the ejector button and have them fly off somewhere else, because that's not how the world works. Sometimes we're just surrounded by things that we're uncomfortable with, which like like I'm talking about mindfulness, but this also brings back to like immediate rewards opposed to like long-term rewards. I have this, and my therapist told me what it's called, but it's like it's like a stressor. Like I try to get rid of the immediate stress and forget about long-term consequences for that. And to do that, like in order to like develop the skill of being able to think about things long-term, I have to broaden my awareness. Like for instance, if you're watching this, I was literally right on the camera, like you were seeing mostly forehead and chin. And then I backed up because I became aware of my surroundings. I'm like, oh, that's not good for the frame. But B, I don't know why I need to be that assertive and right there, because now like I was just aware of the camera. But when I backed up, I became aware of my space around me because I was feeling very claustrophobic. And then just doing that little movement made me feel like a lot more free and open. And those little tricks can actually do a lot for you because another thing that can happen with this awareness is like in acting, there's a thing called acting from the outside in, where like we don't feel upset, we don't feel sad. And sometimes like there are people who can turn on tears, but the tears also don't feel real because you can cry without actually exhibiting that emotion. And so sometimes in order to get somewhere, you have to work from the outside in. And so some people like have music that they have to make themselves cry. And then some people just have like, I think a mantra of something that they say to get themselves into like the moment of the scene. For instance, I don't jump to anger quickly. I used to think anger was really bad because the way that anger was used against me as a child. And then I realized like all emotions have a space, and to like hold any of them off is only going to like result in something weird happening down the line because you were avoiding something. But because of that avoidance of anger, I had a scene in college where I was supposed to be screaming at my girlfriend and screaming in a way that was very abusive, which I don't agree with that. And I don't like screaming or being that kind of angry, but that was what the scene was. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to get there because it's not a world that Camron himself would ever enter, because nothing somebody that I love could do would make me shout at them in this way that's required. So what I have to do is I have to look up what yelling looks like. happens inside your body when you get that heated. And I had to go in like the outside in. I was like, okay, well, you start huffing a lot, you start like really breathing shallowly, and then you get like really tight. And like I really had to approach it more scientifically, and then like add in the anger as I did all these steps. And I could tell that I was doing it successfully because of the way I was getting a reaction. But because it was a way my body was never used to experiencing, I did become aware that like, oh, this anger is an exhausting emotion, because it's the one and only time I've ever felt like I was being really like dramatic on set. Is I literally had to stop the scene, and because we were shooting for like, I think it was a 3-hour class, but we were shooting for a while, and I told like, because like the crew that like, hey, this scene takes a lot out of me. I can do it, but is there a way that somebody could make sure that I had water every time we cut? Because otherwise, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get through with this, because this is so physically and mentally exhausting that I am parched. I need liquid. I need to make sure that I have that thing covered, because I'm not sure, because I've never inhabited this part of myself before, what this is gonna do to me, because I feel like I'm about to pass out. But like, I mean, this is gonna sound weird. It was a fun experience because it was like, oh, this is what angry Camron looks like. I have never been around angry Camron before, because the only time I ever gotten anywhere close to that same amount of angry before was when I was a child and I was throwing tantrums. But like, even that was pale to what I was doing. And again, speaking of awareness, again, angry scene, yelling at my girlfriend, things escalate. At the same time, I had to remain composed because we were on we were on a couch bed, and we continued the scene like you're supposed to, but the couch bed is one of those folding ones, and so I sat down to like get it, like not get it on, but like go into a deep like argument with somebody, and then the bed collapsed on the other person. And I was just like, I'm going to react as the character and be really mad at them as though it was their fault that the bed collapsed on them, which I would never do to somebody. But that's one of the funny things about anger, is it's like, once you're angry, everything makes you angry. Like, even things that aren't somebody else's fault, because you're in an emotional state, it's still their fault. And it's just like, because of that awareness of what the emotions do to you, that also is how now I'm able to recognize the difference between myself and my emotions. Like, if anger happens to me today, I know that A, it's okay to be angry and to let those emotions out. But B, the thoughts I'm having because I'm angry aren't the truth. They're a reaction of something that I feel was like violated. Because usually for me, when anger is triggered, it's because a deep trust of mine was destroyed. And the person that destroyed it doesn't seem to have a lot of care for it. And that's usually where my anger comes from. But that's kind of like usually how that works, is emotions can make you very nearsighted. Like, you don't have an awareness of anybody else because all you feel is just the rush of emotion. You don't have the ability to be aware, which is why I keep reiterating the fact that we have a peak and it's a wave, and the peak is basically the point of the wave right before it comes crashing back down. That's the peak before it rolls over. And when you're at that peak, nothing you're going to do is going to make that wave come down and be still again in a silent way. The only way to go down is to allow the wave to crash over. Because then it will descend and slowly fiddle out until it's back to being a normal amount of water moving back and forth. It's no longer a huge wave. And when you are at that peak, your emotional state is not going to allow you to be mindful easily. Like all you're going to be mindful of is, this is the emotion I'm having and this is how I feel. But if you can somehow find a way to broaden like 1 degree, Like if all you're aware of is the room you're in and like you're angry, the walls make you angry, you want to punch them. If you can somehow add a second degree of awareness, like something people use in mindfulness to help them separate from an emotion if it's that powerful, is like cold water is a good example of this, where people have like plunged their faces in cold water. Or taking a shower, or just either acting opposite or doing something that is a change in the body, so that way it distracts the mind from what it's doing, so that way it helps make the wave crash sooner rather than grow more powerful, if that makes sense. And that it was, and that, every ladies and gentlemen, is kind of my breakdown of mindfulness, reiterating just the different points of like when it's good to broaden your awareness and when sometimes we do that to protect ourselves. Hopefully you guys have learned something and you can utilize it for yourself. That's it for today's episode. If you guys are listening to this, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps bring this out to more people. As you guys go throughout the week, if you could do anything for yourself, just take a moment, take a deep breath. The 8x8x8x8 square really helps me because you just I'm gonna do it with you guys now. You just take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You hold for 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you blow out for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You hold for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you breathe in again, and you just repeat that. I was doing it kind of not as hard as I usually do because it's hard to talk when you're doing it, but I want to make sure you guys heard how it works. Also do it slowly, because if you do that too quickly, it's going to leave you lightheaded, and that's not good, especially if you're prone to like fainting. But yeah, just take a moment just for yourself and remember that it's okay. And it would be if all you have was like as a success with something small, then that's good because it's still a little bit of change. And remember, as you go throughout the week, don't forget to show up for yourself because you matter.